We passed our first year anniversary.
Excuse me, Bill. Bill, I see. It looks like Costas is in the. Is
I'll
Costas?
come in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There we go.
I can't hear that well. Is it me?
It's pretty clear here, Cheryl.
Oh, there's Costas.
It's clear the volume is low.
Okay, so it's been a year. We've passed our first year anniversary. I think this is probably our 15th or 16th official meeting. Let me just remind folks as to the agenda and go over the logistics of how we'll manage the call. We'll start off with an introduction and establish a quorum. Then we'll move to the minutes, approving the minutes of the previous call. Then we'll move to a discussion and vote on language for amendment number 2. At that stage, we're going to also invite public participation, and I'll describe that more in a minute. Then we're going to move to the 4th agenda item, which is a discussion and vote on proposed strategy for advancing the amendment. Again, we'll invite the public to participate in that topic. The 5th agenda topic will be public testimony, and of course, the public will be invited. The 6th topic is other business, and we have 3 items of other business so far under that heading. One is our request for a meeting with the 5 appointing authorities. Second is the plan to finish the second report by June 30th. And of course, the time and place for the next call. And the 7th agenda item for tonight is a motion to adjourn. We have 2 forms of connectivity. The commissioners are designated as panelists. And as panelists, the commissioners have full audio and visual privileges. The public are coming in through a Zoom link, and they have audio and video privileges when they're recognized. And we're doing this just to avoid the type of disruption and interruption that we had in one of our. So as we go through, when we get to the stage where public participation is requested and invited, we'll just ask people to indicate your interest either by asking a question or just raising your hand in the chat room, and we'll recognize everybody as we go through those agenda items. Any questions about the agenda or the logistics of how we'll run the meeting? Okay, hearing none, let's move forward. So I'll just call the roll and ask people to identify themselves, and we'll establish a quorum. This is Bill Kilmartin from Newburyport. Carmen?
Carmen Gentile from Sudbury.
Laval?
Lovell Alexander from Framingham.
Jeff?
Jeff Clements, Cambridge.
Cheryl?
Cheryl Clyburn Crawford, Boston.
Matthew?
Matt McKnight, Boston.
Scott?
Scott McDermott, Medfield.
Costas?
Costas Panagopoulos, Wellesley.
Dominic?
Dominic Pangallo, Salem.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Are there any other commissioners perhaps in the attendee list? Right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have a quorum, and if other commissioners join, of course, we'll recognize them, introduce them as we go. Ready to move to the 2nd agenda item, which is review and approval of the minutes. Jeff, you want to share your screen and show the minutes?
Yes, and these minutes have been circulated and are on the public website. And I did not receive any feedback, so we are ready for a motion, I believe.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Move to accept the minutes.
I
Do we have a
second. Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, we're ready to vote. We'll have to do a roll call vote since we're doing this remotely. Bill Kilmartin votes yes. Jeff Clement?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Naval?
Yes.
Dominic?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Matthew?
I'm sorry. I was just not moving as fast as you all. And I had not had a chance to go through the exact language. This is the minutes that recorded the vote against this amendment.
Yeah, the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, so I just want to note that I did not vote in support of this amendment, I believe. I understand that it notes that the commission did recommend this language as a majority for certain, but it did not note the tally of the vote in the minutes. For what it's worth, it's a small piece of this, but I just
I'm happy to note your vote against, Matt, if that's acceptable to the commission. Just as a friendly amendment before we finish the voting, if that would suffice.
Yeah. That'd be fine with me.
Okay.
Any objection? So here, no objection. You want to indicate that you're seeing you're doing it in real time.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the minutes as corrected.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion about the minutes? Okay, so we were going through the roll call, and I think, Scott, were you next?
Yes.
And did I miss anybody?
Me, but now I vote yes.
Okay, you can stop sharing your screen, Jeff. Thank you. Okay, so the third agenda item is discussion and vote on the language of what we've been referring to as amendment number 2. And I'm going to ask if any members of the working group have an example of the language that we might view as we have the discussion and debate about this language. Carmen, Naval, Cheryl, do any of you have a copy of the language?
I don't have it right on me, but I don't know if Carmen, do you have it on you? I'll have to dig for it though.
Okay, well, while we hold on, and as we were having this discussion in the previous call, we decided to table the matter for additional consideration and then resume the discussion in this meeting. So I think it would be helpful for us to have something in front of us as we resume that discussion. So why don't we pause and see if we can bring up a version of the language. Jeff, did you record the language from the previous call in the minutes?
Yes, I did. Do you want me to pull that up?
Yeah, maybe we can just have that in front of us.
Okay.
And you don't have to have the whole set of minutes, just, copy out that one piece so we can just focus specifically on those words.
Yeah, it's the last paragraph on the first page.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And this is a cut and paste from the minutes, so this is where we left off.
Okay. So the working group was taking a look at this language for what we're referring to as the Second Amendment. Does this reflect the sense of the working group that do I have a motion to move forward in this matter?
I vote to move forward with the language.
With the language, do we have a second?
I second.
Thank
This
you.
this is the same language. Sorry.
It is the same language.
It hasn't changed from what we looked at.
Has not changed.
Okay, so discussion. Let's go through the commissioners first, and then let's entertain as many comments as people want in the public. Let's do the commissioners first. So any commissioner wants to offer an opinion as to this language that's in front of you?
Well, the language makes very clear that juridical persons have no rights other than those expressly granted by state or federal law, that they do not possess the constitutional rights of natural persons. So it's very specific, very, very precise, and that's what it does.
Does it, if I may, does this contemplate existing law as well as future law and court decisions that may have been made in the past that interpret certain constitutional rights as applying to corporations? And this wouldn't undo those decisions, would it?
So the court always looks at an amendment that's passed and reconciles it with existing law. Obviously, it would change to a large extent. And in instances where the court, if the court was to strike down something or say, well, you don't have this right, and the federal government the Congress wanted corporations that it charters to have that right, then the Congress could pass legislation to give corporations that ability. Similarly, states would be able to give corporations the authority or the ability that they chose to give them.
Do we think this is Bill, do we think this language is strong enough? I mean, it's very straightforward and short and to the point. Do we think it's strong enough?
Well, I think this is Costas. I think it makes the, a very basic point in a very succinct way. I think it can be made, I think it could be streamlined even further. I don't think we need to say, for example, that corporations or other juridical persons do not possess the same constitutional rights as natural persons, but only those rights expressly granted. It seems that state and federal law can then, it implies that state and federal law can grant corporations constitutional rights, even the same constitutional rights as natural persons. So I think it could even say that corporations and other juridical persons possess only those rights expressly granted to them by state and federal law, right? Which basically makes it clear that they do not possess constitutional rights. So that's another possibility.
Jeff, could you redline in real time so we could see what the language as amended might look like?
I'm going to keep the earlier version on just so people can see that too.
Yeah.
Costas, you want to say it again?
Well, I would just strike do not possess the same constitutional rights as natural persons, but possess only those rights.
Yes, that's even cleaner.
Okay, so I'll just move it down so we can have both up there for continued discussion.
Now, we do have to grapple with the issues as, we heard a moment ago about freedom of association and freedom of, all sorts of other freedoms that corporations and other entities, including religious organizations and other types of groups, benefit from. I mean, this is an argument that Nico had been making for a while, and I think it has a lot of merit to it. This was the sticking point, but not sure how to get around that if we want a kind of expansive, kind of blanket approach to what rights they have or do not have.
Well, I remember Professor Coates when he spoke with us, and he listening to what he had to say, and his specialty is corporate law. The concern that Nico had raised seemed less concerning.
Yeah.
So, to put it really simply. So I'd be interested in in Coates's view of this, should,
Now, one thing I would, one implication I would also raise is that there's nothing in this language except for our other amendment that prevents states and federal law from giving corporations exactly the kinds of rights that we're trying to strip them of with this Second Amendment.
that's right.
And my concern would be that actually it would open the door to the states to actually expand those rights, right? I mean, theoretically, they could use this particular language in order to be able to pass legislation that would give rights to these corporations and other entities that they don't already possess.
I share that concern. I'm not sure how you control for that in the language.
Yeah.
I'd be interested.
But, you know, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, part of the problem is that corporations and entities exist by definition by state law that does in fact set their rights and privileges to make them actually work, so that they can sue and be sued in court. They can be held to contracts. They can, all the things that make them useful are because their rights and obligations are defined by federal and state law. So could Congress or the Massachusetts legislature say that corporations have certain rights? Well, yes, and they do. That's what they do now. But that is necessary, or else they're not very useful vehicles to use for any purpose, because you wouldn't have any sense of what your rights were if you invested or otherwise used a corporate entity. So,
and you know, in the context of campaign finance, I mean, this is united, right? I mean, there were very different rules and governing what corporations and other groups could do in different states across the country, which is likely to be the case if this is passed again. There'll be some states in which it'll be, you know, they'll have no restrictions whatsoever, and others that'll be pretty restrictive.
Maybe analogous to the way an automobile built in California might have more restrictive emissions regulations than a car built, you know, in some other state. So in one state, the corporation could do some things, but in another, it would be restricted.
We, right now, we talk about only those rights expressly granted. Do we need to insert constitutional rights?
I don't think so. I think rights are rights. They may be constitutional or other, but they will, you know, all of those will be granted to them. I mean, if the rights are granted by state and federal law, they're not constitutional almost by definition.
I got a question for Jeff with his comments. Can you go back and talk about like Congress's role? Like, are you inferring that they may or they can make it in and around inroads around any potential amendment by, you know, just by virtue of its power to do so and kind of reinterpret the amendment? Is that what you were trying to say?
no, what I was trying to say is most corporations come from state law in America. Most of the public companies that are incorporated in the U.S. actually are incorporated under Delaware law. But it could be any state. Delaware has certain advantages for why corporations do that. But the point is that the privileges, obligations, responsibilities, and rights that are not constitutional rights, but rights defined by that state's incorporation law, are set up in the law, and that's why they work as vehicles for investment or other business or nonprofit for the nonprofit corporation. Some corporations are set up by Congress. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to be quizzed on it, but things like Fannie Mae or maybe Amtrak, I'm not sure, but there are federal corporations, not to go down a rabbit hole, but the question of whether Congress could incorporate entities was a huge issue in the early days of the Republic around the Bank of the United States, with a real battle about whether Congress had the power to do so. But in any event, whatever legislature does have the power to set up corporations, which otherwise don't exist, by definition, they need to say what the rules are. So nobody would use a corporation if it wasn't clear that you could go to court to sue on a breach of contract when your supplier didn't deliver your goods. So that has to be set up. Nobody would use a corporate vehicle if the corporate law did not make clear the relative rights of shareholders versus management, et cetera. So that's all created by state law mostly, but if it's a federal corporation, which is less common, then Congress has to do it. So that's my point, is that it's not nefarious to say Congress and the states will just, create rights and obligations. Just like, the juridical persons, that's a positive aspect too. The Clean Water Act says no person shall, paraphrasing, dump pollution in the water. And then it defines person to include corporations. That's a federal law. It makes sense and it works, but it doesn't have anything to do with constitutional rights. So that's my only point. So that this kind of approach does make some sense if what you're trying to do is say, well, hold it, they don't have constitutional rights of human beings, but we recognize that Congress and states will need to define certain rights and obligations of corporations.
So,
And that's a
Thanks for
positive.
Thanks for clarifying it.
so can I put on the table discussion of an alternative possibility, which is rather than stripping corporations and other juridical persons of anything, could we craft an amendment that basically says the rights enumerated in this Constitution apply only to natural citizens or something, natural persons, something like that, so that we're affirming the rights in the Constitution to, we're limiting the scope of them, but, just kind of restricting it to natural persons?
Yeah, and HJ Res 48 has been brought to our attention. That's been introduced in Congress, and it opens, and it's in our report as one of the congressional bills. Section 1 of that opens with the rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons only. Artificial entities such as corporations, limited liability companies, and other entities established by the laws of any state, the United States, or any foreign state, shall have no rights under the Constitution and are subject to regulation by the people through federal, state, or local law.
Jeff, could you put that language on the screen so we can see that in front of us?
Sure.
And honestly, it seems to me that the first sentence of that is all we would need. One could elaborate, but one need not elaborate necessarily.
So we're now looking at 3 different versions of potential language for what we are calling Amendment number 2. And, let's keep this discussion going, but in a few minutes, I'll ask whether we want to take a motion to amend. The initial motion was version number 1, and whether we want to consider instead version 2 or even version 3. So I'll entertain a motion to amend the initial motion in a few minutes. But let's take a look at this third version in front of us.
Jeff, in the chat window, someone typed the entire amendment in already.
There you tell me. Thank you. All right. Let me go to chat. Not sure how I get over there, but.
Yeah, we're all running.
Click on participants on the bottom and it'll open up the chat window to the side.
Yeah, for some reason, because I'm screen sharing, I can't get that.
You have to go to view options and anyway. You could stop sharing for a second and then grab it, put it in.
mean, the nice thing about framing it like this is that, you know, supporters of this resolution might find this language more amenable, and we could pick up some advocates along the way.
Yeah, I'm far more supportive of the affirmative statement of the ground truth of the Constitution than I am in the negative, for sure. I think I was very receptive to Nico's argument. I wish he was here to give us a kind of analytical thought process of unintended consequences, etc. But I think that this whole group is kind of foundationally built on this principle that the rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons. And I think that that's worth reaffirming in one way, shape, or form.
Agreed.
And I'll just reiterate that I think the rest of what follows in this language is nice to have, but not necessary.
Okay, thank you, Ulysses. It is up on the screen.
Costas, I agree with that. I think it's actually punchier and has a lot of power if you stop after that first sentence.
Yeah.
And it goes to one of Jeff's arguments earlier. We don't know what the future holds, and we want to keep AI entities and other things that are not natural persons at bay, perhaps. And it has a lot of long-term power to just stop at that first sentence.
I worked so hard to get HJ Res 48 Section 1 up there that I left it up there and then made a version 4, which reflects Matt and Costas's recommendation or comment.
I agree that it's a much, I think, more clear statement that what we're trying to accomplish.
So it sounds like there might be some consensus. So I'm not, I would move that we adopt version 4 of this.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the initial motion to now move to version 4. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dominic. Further discussion about version 4, and after that, I'm going to open it up to the public. Are the commissioners finished discussion version 4 of the language on amendment number 2?
Mr. Chair, so is this the version 4? Is this the one sentence?
Yes.
And I'm trying to think what's the well, I know the difference between the third and the fourth one. The third is much broader, so we're talking about just the fourth one, right?
And that's the motion for further discussion is go with version 4. The rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons only.
Okay.
And, you know, after the commissioners have all had a chance to render further opinions in this matter, I wanted to open it up to the public. Any other commissioner wish to speak on this matter at this time before we open it to the public?
Yeah, I'll just posit one more thing just for both of these, and we've talked about it previously, and I think it's important to recognize. There's a good chance in a future court that doesn't exist that the most broad statement here is that part of the interpretation in many cases is that infringing upon the rights of different types of entities or infringing or asking different type of entities to have certain rights or not have certain rights, or to punish them or not punish them in certain ways, has been interpreted as infringing upon the rights of natural persons who own those companies or form those companies, right? And so this does nothing to address that interpretation, but again, to many arguments that we've made, I think people need to, we have to trust the system at some point to understand that this restatement of the 28th Amendment many years later is a reaffirmation of the principles of the Constitution, and let it be interpreted as such, as opposed to trying to legislate through the writing here. But I do want to flag that there are people that will interpret this, even this statement, this very clear and simple statement, as something that when you're looking at a corporation, you are infringing upon the rights of the shareholders, for example. And thus you want to be thoughtful that that will be a piece of this discussion going forward. I do personally believe that restating this component has a power hundreds of years later in reaffirming the core beliefs of this country and the core foundational principles of this country. But it would be amiss not to flag that as a topic.
I'm glad you did, Matt. I agree. And I actually see it as a virtue, not a vice. That the problem that the court has created is not looking to what the real people involved in the corporation have at stake, but just treating the corporation as if it's a person. So that way there's no distinction between one owned by non-human entities in a global marketplace where you could not possibly find any given human on any given day, say in the Exxon shareholder structure, who actually had a right, a constitutional right at stake in some of the constitutional litigation that Professor Coates described. And yet a small business person whose door is kicked down at night on his business and government storms in and takes the papers and effects, that sure sounds like a Fourth Amendment violation to most people. And you would want that small business person to not be left with no remedy simply because the business was incorporated, I think. And same with other applications, where if this gave the court a reminder to look for a human being who actually has a constitutional right at stake, even though there's a corporate entity that's in the litigation, we would be a lot better off on both counts, not going too far to give non-human entities rights, but also on the other hand, to make sure we're protecting real human rights in corporate situations.
Mhm.
Thank you for
I
those
think
comments.
that's, Jeff, I think that's compelling.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Jeff. Other commissioners want to have comments on this matter before we turn to public?
I agree. I think the fourth version there is clean and to the point and says what we needed to say. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jeff.
Any other members of the commission want to speak in this matter before we turn to the public?
Yeah, this is Costas again. I would just reiterate that there's nothing in this that would prevent Congress or any of the states from enshrining these very same rights to corporations and other entities if they choose to. It's just that the Constitution of the United States will not be extending its rights to those entities.
Thank you, Costas. Other commissioners?
I just have a,
Sorry, Dominic.
go ahead, Nemo.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about that last point that you made, Jeff. So that, a future, so say the state of whatever could adopt a law granting free speech rights to corporations in that state, or the Congress could grant a law, pass a law granting free speech rights to all corporations. Would that, I mean, wouldn't that law be superseded by the Constitution, which prohibits that right from being extended to the corporation?
My reading of this is that Congress and the states are free to do that, even in light of this amendment, except insofar as it's limited through our First Amendment, right? The
Okay.
amendment that we.
And you know, we have to keep in mind there are many states can accord rights to people that they don't have under the U.S. Constitution. For example,
Right.
our Declaration of Rights in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights gives us rights over, we're much more protected than people in other states by our Constitution and our Declaration of Rights here in Massachusetts. So
Right.
similarly, with this language, a state could choose to give non-natural juridical persons rights that another state wouldn't give them. So states always have the option of doing things that that are not superseded by federal law. And
But
yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to, my question is more about a law that's passed that's in contradiction with that directly grants a right from the Constitution to the corporations. So in the case of the Massachusetts Constitution, there's nothing in the United States Constitution that says, for example, the right to education is in the Massachusetts Constitution, but it's not in the federal Constitution, so there's no conflict. Maybe I'm not being clear. I'm just
So-
concerned about, yeah,
Perhaps if a state sought to give what we would regard as a right to a juridical person, they wouldn't be getting it as a right. The state would be giving it the privilege of that ability. So it's maybe semantics.
Yeah. I don't think we could really get around that, except if we say that, you know, corporations and other artificial entities have no rights whatsoever, and enshrine that in
Right.
the U.S. Constitution. If we're not willing to go that far, then we're going to be leaving the door open for Congress and the states to extend some rights to them, but it won't necessarily be the rights of natural born or natural persons as enumerated in the U.S. Constitution.
Said well.
I agree. Thank you.
Other commissioners want to offer comment before we go to the public? Okay, hearing nothing, I'd like to now go to the public, and Greg, could you help and just administer the number of individuals who have indicated they would like to offer a comment on the proposed language, the rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons only?
Presently, there are two people. The first is Stephen Gagg, and the other's three. I'm going to allow Stephen to talk.
Stephen, the chair recognizes Stephen. Stephen, can you keep it to two, not more than 3 minutes?
This is Laura Gang. Sorry, I'm using my husband's Zoom account.
Hi, Laura. Can you keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, please?
This will be very short. Given the eloquence and brevity of this proposed amendment, I would just urge you to consider making it a section of the First Amendment that you already approved, rather than an entirely separate amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Greg.
Next one is Paul Lowenstein.
Chair recognizes Paul.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I would second what Laura Gang said, and I would also suggest consideration of the last sentence of HJR 48, which uses the word privileges, and I think distinguishing the word privilege from the word right has some value. And I would encourage the commission to consider adding that last sentence from HJR 48, which reads, "The privileges of artificial entities shall be determined by the people through federal, state, or local law, and shall not be construed to be inherent or inalienable."
And Paul, just a follow-up question there. Are you suggesting that we add that sentence to the existing sentence, make it a two-sentence?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting, and I'm suggesting that regardless of whether you add that second sentence or not, that you bundle them together in one amendment proposal.
Yep. And commissioners have any questions for Paul? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Greg, who's next?
Next one is Ulysses Latner.
We recognize Ulysses.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So first, I want to thank you all for putting the sincere effort into this particular amendment, since we really didn't get into this much at your previous meetings. But I just want to encourage you not to actually. It seems like to some extent you're overthinking a little bit, because HJ Res 48 is a fully developed amendment that has 70 plus members of Congress in support of it, massive nationwide activist energy behind it, and we know that that's a wording that motivates people, and it's very clear. And I guess I want to ask through the chair why, whether the people who are preferring the shorter version, why you think it would actually be better to, in some way, abandon the support that we know HJ Res 48 has for its larger and more detailed wording. Why you think it would be better to actually cut that down, which kind of in some way discards a lot of the progress already made towards mobilizing people around the more built out wording, which I guess you would call that your version 3 here. So that's a question through the chair for the people who prefer the only one sentence version 4. why do you think that's superior than the more fully built out version 3?
Would any of the commissioners like to respond to Ulysses' question?
Yeah, sure. I'll comment. And this is actually both Ulysses and the previous comment. I actually don't agree that we should put them into the original amendment. I am also an admirer of short and concise writing and precision. But I think that there are two different things or two different components that we've heard lots of feedback on, both in testimony and in written form. And that's also a piece of HJ Res 48 that slows it down from adoption, is that there's a question about the undue influence of money in politics, which needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed in a very direct way. And then there's a question about a broader breadth of what the Constitution entails about corporations across the whole body of law. And if you want to address both of those things and you try to put them together, you actually, in some ways, maybe counterintuitively, limit your audience. Versus if you break them apart, you can have robust and productive debates about their interplay with each other, but their independence. I, for one, support, for example, number 4 here, as we've talked about it today, but I obviously am a vote of further debate needed on the money in politics amendment that this commission proposed after much thought, and I deeply respect my colleagues for putting forth. And if you put them together, it creates a must-take-all type mentality, as opposed to...
Can I clarify?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Ulysses, hold on. Thank you, Matthew. Are there other commissioners that want to respond to Ulysses' question?
Yes, this is Costas. I would say that I'm a fan of very succinct wording for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is because any additional or more expansive language just opens the door for objections raised for any number of reasons that could potentially, thwart our efforts here. So, for example, there isn't even consensus about the notion of artificial entities, right? Is that preferable terminology to, say, juridical persons? Furthermore, there's no mention of unions in the language of the HJR 48 resolution, which could be a limiting factor, and one of the reasons why although this bill has a lot of support, it hasn't gotten the traction it needs to move forward. So while you're right that this language in version 3 has a fair amount of support, it has not managed for whatever reason to get the kind of support it needs to move forward. And one of the reasons could be bound up in some of the details in some of these other sentences here, which I don't view as necessary.
Do other commissioners want to respond to Ulysses' question?
This is Dominic. I just want to echo that sentiment that I think each sentence in the third version kind of just says everything that the other sentences say. And I think the more words you put into an amendment, the more opportunities there are for future loopholes. And while this doesn't mention or any, we can't contemplate right now. And the simpler we can make it, I think not only does it reduce the probability of that happening in the future, it also increases the chances that more people will be able to find something to like in the proposed language. We know.
Thank you, Dominic. Are other commissioners want to respond to Ulysses' question? Ulysses, back to you. Did you have a follow-up question?
Well, I just wanted to clarify that Matt misunderstood me. My opinion about whether it should be one amendment or two, that's not really what I'm talking about here. I was only talking about the question of the particular part of HJ Res 48 that is version 3 on your screen here versus the more highly reduced version that you all are suggesting as version 4. That's the only thing I was asking about.
Okay, clarification. I think we addressed that. Okay. And anything else? We ready to move on?
Yes, the next person who wants to speak is Justin Island.
We recognize Justin.
Yes, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just had a question, I guess, about the language of natural persons. Is there specific like jurisprudence or legal definition where the adjective natural sufficiently defines and clarifies as far as legal language would be concerned?
Thank you, Justin. Would any member of any commissioner want to respond to that question?
I'll take a shot at it as in my experience in the law, and I think it can be verified by pretty ready consultation to the law. Natural persons is a term of art, which means human being in the law, as distinct from persons under law, which is the juridical person. So the term persons could in the law refer, apart from the Constitution, just any other application of state law or federal law, could refer to corporate entities or human beings. And when the law is trying to make clear it's a human being, it's natural persons. So it's an excellent point. Certainly worth us double and triple checking to make sure that's the case, because that's the intent. But that's my best understanding.
Thank you, Jeff. Do other commissioners want to respond to Justin's question? Hearing none. Justin, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg, who's next?
David Rosenberg.
We recognize David.
Hi, thank you for all the work you've done so far and the work you're doing. I support the positions stated by several of the members of the public, in particular Laura and Paul and Ulysses. I would like to second the idea that the last sentence of the third draft be appended as the second and last sentence of the fourth draft, to make it clear that any actions that states or other legislative bodies pass will in fact grant privileges, but the privileges can't be inherent or unalienable. And I also feel that the possibility, so that was point one, add the last sentence of draft 3 to the sentence of draft 4. And point 2 is basically the argument for a single amendment. I think that it's going to be hard to get anything proposed and ratified, and that our shot at it is likely to be the only shot that we get. And therefore, in order to meet the charter that the commission had, which was both of these points, that both points should be included in a single amendment to maximize the probability that we get the 2 points accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let's take the first point, and for the sake of clarity, Jeff, could you, you're sharing the screen, I believe, so could you cut and paste the last sentence there and append it to the fourth version? So we see this fourth version modified to be 2 sentences, not 1.
I'm going to continue the practice of,
right.
Now we have a 5th version.
Right.
You can just see them all at
Yeah,
once.
so for clarity, I just want to say,
that's what it
David,
would look like.
And I think Paul raised this too. Is this what you're proposing, that we tack on this sentence into what you're now seeing on the screen in front of us?
That is what I'm proposing, yes.
So I'd ask other commissioners to react to that suggestion.
Well, feels like I don't, and Costas made this point previously. I'm not sure I disagree with the language. I don't know what extra it adds on top of the basic point. Concision being a virtue.
Yeah, sometimes less is more, as they say, or brevity is a virtue. I get it. Other commissioners have a reaction to what's in front of you? Okay, hearing none. And David, we heard your second point, which is about the merits of combining the two sets of language into a single amendment. So I think we covered that. Greg, who's next?
Okay, the next person is Barry Rosenberg.
We recognize Barry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay. 2 points. I favor the fifth version that you have there. And the reason I'm in favor of the second sentence is it closes loopholes that states would allow artificial entities like corporations to exploit. And in the same vein, that addresses the problems that we have seen expanded since the Citizens United decision in 2010.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions? Okay, then next, who's up, Greg?
Michael Bleiweiss.
We recognize Michael.
Thank you. I just want to kind of augment the arguments made by Barry Rosenberg and Paul on incorporating the second sentence, i.e. version 5, which is that by using the word privileges, you basically make it explicit that they're not rights. And by using the word entities, you make it explicit that they cannot be thought of as people. And as soon as the chat box drops out again. And also it makes explicit that they are indeed subject to regulation, indisputably. I also agree that, there should be one amendment, but in keeping with some conversations we've had where and some submissions that were made prior to this meeting, that if you're taking a multi-pronged approach, the single amendment option for both portions improves your odds.
Thank
it
you,
gives
Michael.
you more options.
Thank you, Michael. Do the commissioners have any questions for Michael? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Who's next, Greg?
The next one is Paul Lowenstein.
Paul, we recognize Paul.
Thank you, Bill. I just want to point out that the problem we're trying to solve here arose from the Supreme Court misinterpreting the Constitution to extend the inalienable rights of natural persons to artificial entities. And I think this adding that second sentence in version number 5 helps clarify the intent of this amendment. I think I recall Nico saying in his lengthy memo that he put forth at the end of December that the Constitution already gives constitutional rights to real people. So if we only have the first sentence, I would ask the question, are we really adding anything that isn't already in the Constitution? But when you add that second sentence, it really does clarify what's intended here and reduces the wiggle room of the Supreme Court to misinterpret the Constitution, which is how we got into this situation in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the commissioners?
My response, Paul, thank you for that comment, is that the injection of the word only takes care of that in that sentence, right? It's clear that that no one else is extended these rights. So I think that this covers it.
Thank you. Greg, how many more do we have?
Just one person.
Good, because we have other agenda items that we need to get to. And so let's go to the next person. Who's that?
Caitlin Sullivan Fieldman.
We recognize Caitlin.
Oh, sorry, that's my wife's name. It's Sam Sullivan, Sam Fieldman. I just wanted to point out that the first sentence on its own of that last proposal could be misread to construe that states can't even grant corporations certain privileges that are rights of natural persons in the Constitution, such as running newspapers or protecting their Fourth Amendment rights that states may grant to them. Adding the second sentence makes it clear that states are allowed to expand those things that a corporation can do through granting them privileges, and that the first sentence can only then be read as saying that the Constitution itself does not grant any of those powers to the states. These are powers to the corporations. Rather, they're powers that states can give them through law if states find it expedient to do so.
Interesting point. Other commissioners have questions for Sam? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Greg, who's next?
There are two more people who've raised their hand. The next one is Clark Reddick.
We recognize Clark.
Hi, Clark Reddick here from Waltham. Thank you. Interesting discussion. My biggest input at this moment would just be to urge the commission to submit one amendment. Getting an amendment done to the Constitution is obviously and historically a tremendous undertaking, and the idea that we would double our workload and basically have our chances of getting this done right, it just doesn't make much sense to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Clark. Do the commissioners have any questions for Clark? Hearing none, we'll move on. Who's next, Greg?
I believe this is the last one, Alex Crowley.
We recognize Alex.
Hi, this is Alex Crowley from Weymouth, and I just want to say that I support the separating, adding that second sentence and clarifying the privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to go back to the commissioners. We had a motion and it was seconded, and it was the first version of language that we see in front of us. And then we've had a discussion about potentially amending that language to be either the second version, third version, fourth version, or what now appears as the fifth version. Do we have a motion to amend the initial motion to go from version 1 to one of these other versions?
I'd move to amend to version number 5.
Do we have a second?
I second that, Chair, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we now have version number 5 of this in front of us. A discussion.
So I think the right, what Sam had to say really rings true to me, that that second sentence makes clear that the states, that the Congress and the states have the ability to give juridical persons powers that they choose to. So it eliminates the problem of, I think it makes it stronger rather than weaker.
Thank you. Other commissioners discuss this motion? We're in version 5 of the language. Okay, hearing none. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Recognize no vote.
I'm kind of piggyback on Carmine, and just only to say that I think the more succinct, but like using very carefully powerful words and language, I think that will have the effect of trying to forward the amendment and getting it ratified. So I'm on the agreeance of the fifth version that we have on our screen. Thanks.
Thank you, Neville. Other commissioners, discussion of this motion? Hearing none, are we ready for a vote? Okay, I'll call the roll. Jeff, how do you vote? We're on the.
Bill, I would just have one.
Yeah, I think Matt was going to comment. I was trying to say it. I was on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
we're learning how to handle this technology.
Yeah.
Okay, recognize Matthew, and then we'll do Jeff.
I will reiterate my I wish Nico were here statement, but that's more of just a philosophical statement, I guess. I think I really like the language we had approved. I think that it's so precise and clear as to what the Constitution was written to do. I think it is worthy of, by far, given where we are in the world and everything people have shared, of reiterating that the rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons only. I'm not sure what the second sentence adds uniquely different to that. And thus, I'm also not sure, because I haven't had a chance to really think through it, which I think is what our charge is to do, the extent to which there are other consequences, or unintended or otherwise, of the specific words in this language. And I kind of just charged back to Nico when he did his analysis of this. And I wonder if we accomplish everything that we want to accomplish with the first, and then open up a set of things that we don't understand with the second.
So do I understand, Matthew, that you gravitated back to version 4?
I am.
Yeah, I am as well. That's why I would not vote in favor of version 5. Jeff, you were going to offer a comment?
Well, I wanted to hear what Matt was going to say, and I was just trying to make sure we slowed down so he could get in there. But I will say, I tend to give the point of conciseness a lot of weight, and some of Matt's comments, and would really want to know what the second sentence that section 5 adds to that. I think my understanding of what Nico's point was is really that the court can interpret cases involving corporations to implicate constitutional rights of people, and some would say that that's what they did in Citizens United or other cases. Certainly Justice Kennedy would say that. I don't happen to agree that's what they did, but that's what they say. And adding that second sentence doesn't prevent that in any way. They still can do that. And it's a truism that the privileges of artificial entities are determined by the people through federal, state, and local law. And that if they're not constitutional rights, they're not inherent or inalienable. So I don't think it adds anything. I don't think it hurts necessarily, but I think it does hurt if it complexifies something that otherwise has great resonance with Americans across the political spectrum, and can accelerate this work, so that if it isn't actually adding a whole lot, even if it may be adding something, we should just know that it comes with a risk that we go backwards for no good reason. So yeah. I'm not saying there is no good reason, but I'm hearing reasons, and think there will be others who have reasons that just complexifies something. If it doesn't add anything, why say it? And if it does add, but I don't know what it adds, how can I go with it? Right. So that's.
So I interpret your comments that, like Matthew, you're gravitating back towards version 4.
Well, the larger sense, what I would suggest is, last time we had a working group proposal, heard it out, and then set it up for the vote on the next meeting, but allowed further thinking and consideration rather than finalizing the vote and sort of taking a tentative, yes, let's go that way. And then, let's check in with Nico and others who want to comment and give us better input. So that's kind of how I'd interpret the vote anyway. If turns out we misconstrued something, we'd want to fix it. But yeah, I guess I would suggest we stay with version 4, but be willing to be educated.
Nothing's written in stone. This is not our report. Other commissioners have a discussion about the motion on the table?
I'm of a mind to withdraw my motion because, it really is unclear whether 4 or 5, and 4 has the strength of being clean and precise. And, I was thinking that adding the second sentence was helpful, but, with this discussion now, perhaps it isn't helpful. So,
okay. So do you withdraw the motion?
I withdraw the motion, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we're back to the initial motion. Corporations and other juridical persons do not possess the same constitutional rights as natural persons, but only those rights expressly granted them by state or federal law. Do we have any a proposal to amend that language, probably to version 4?
I'd move to amend it to version 4.
Do we have a second?
Okay.
Any discussion by the commissioners about version 4 of the language? It's the boldface that you see in front of you. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call the roll.
Oh, so,
Go ahead, Naval.
sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, like, I'm not opposed to version 4. I just want to make that clear. But I just wondering, like, does everybody or most of the commission feel that, like, are we opening up to, you know, unintended consequences if we're going with version 5? That's the kind of gist that I'm getting. Whereas, like, with version 4, it still says everything that we mostly want to say, or everything we want to say, but just kind of leaving it at that and not getting too much into the details, and you know, and so people can kind of cherry pick. Is that kind of where most everybody's feelings are?
Would another commissioner like to respond to Naval's question?
Well, I thought the purpose was that we was just keeping it streamlined and concise. And that really, that second sentence doesn't really add a whole lot of value.
That's right.
Thank you, Cheryl. Other commissioners?
I would just add that I think that there's some ambiguity with the phrase artificial entities when we use juridical persons in the first amendment that we did. I'm of a mind to prefer the 4th version here, but I wouldn't be opposed to the 5th version either. I'm not sure that it adds a whole lot, but I'm concerned about adding more opportunities for misinterpretation of the language.
Thank you, Dominic. And it's the 4th version of language is the version that's on the table. Other commissioners have a comment?
I'm sorry, can you just clarify which version? Okay, that's
In version, we're discussing the version. We have a motion seconded to adopt version 4 of the language. Any other discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is vote for version 4. Bill says yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Costas?
Yes.
Carmen?
Yes.
Dominic?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Scott? Scott had to briefly go to another meeting. He's going to rejoin us. Cheryl?
Yes.
Novell?
Yes.
Vignette, did I miss any commissioners? Okay, so we voted to accept that. We're ready to move on to the next agenda item. You can stop sharing your screen now, Jeff, but save this language because we're going to come back to it in the next topic, okay?
Okay.
All right. The next topic on the agenda is a discussion and a vote about the suggested strategy for advancing the amendment. On behalf of the working group, I'd like to walk you through the report of the working group, which is in the form of a PowerPoint. And then we'll entertain a motion and then a discussion about what you see in the PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen. Can people see the screen?
Yes.
This was discussed at the previous meeting. We received some feedback. There's been a little bit of fine tuning in here and correcting some stylistic problems. So other than that, it's pretty consistent what you saw before. So there's this slide here, and I give folks a chance to read this. Going to move on. It's the recommendation of the working group that we have one strategy for the 2 amendments. This is the first amendment that was voted on in the previous meeting. The second amendment is going to be replaced with the language that you just voted. So Jeff, literally, you could take the language that you had in the previous conversation and cut and paste it in here. These guiding principles were in the report from December 31st. So we can have a discussion about whether we want to just reiterate the same thing now in our final report as we had written in our previous report, or whether we choose to change these guiding principles. But these are the ones verbatim that you had approved in the December 31st report. Multiple paths, a more broadly inclusive process, and proactive outreach. Give you a chance to digest this a bit more. And some of the commissioners would recognize the language because you wrote it in the previous report. Okay, the strategy summarized in a single page is in 4 parts: a multi-dimensional political leadership dimension, a dimension related to the other states, and a dimension related to the public, including public interest groups, the media. This is the public at large. So a multi-dimensional strategy. Point 2, strategy would be driven by the citizens, grassroots across the states, nonpartisan, seeking support from Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, everything in between. The strategy is not restricted to a single route, is bifurcated, pursue both routes, ask Congress to pass the amendment for ratification by the states, or ask Congress to form the amendment proposing convention, and that would be the limited amendment proposing convention. Either path could accomplish the objectives. And then what you see in the next slides is specific activities organized in a time frame of near term, midterm, and longer term. Near term being basically between the time frame of June and through August. So June, July, August, the summer. Midterm take us through the fall, through January, in the next presidential election. September, October, November, December, January. And then the longer term would be after January of 2021, which, as I mentioned, would be after the next conclusion of the next presidential election. Let me move on now in this briefing to the next page. I need to, when you share screens, it is awkward, isn't it? Okay, so one of the specific activity is to conduct a meeting with the 5 Massachusetts appointing authorities, seeking their feedback on a report and their support for the strategy of advancing the amendments. On this particular point, we have sent certified letters to the 5 appointing authorities. All 5 letters I have confirmed receipt. We have heard back from Senate President Spilka. She has offered us a meeting on June 23. We've heard back from Governor Baker. He sends his regrets, but has offered us a meeting with his staff, Jordan and Noah. I forget Jordan's last name. As of the time of this call, I have not heard back from Secretary Galvin, Speaker DeLeo, or Attorney General Healy. But that would be a near-term activity in the strategy, is to get a meeting with all 5 of the appointing authorities, or as many as we can, and in those meetings, seek their reaction to what we've come up with, as well as their support for advancing the process. Activity number 2 is to send a letter again to the 5 appointing authorities, recommending enactment of House Bill 3208, Senate Bill 2163. And that bill, as you know, has been filed by, amongst others, Commissioner Gentile, and that would call for Congress to form a limited amendment proposing convention. The third activity, also a near-term activity, would be to draft and file legislation to create a successor of Massachusetts Citizens Commission. This is the suggestion that we've talked about before, where the work of this commission could conclude with our final report, hopefully by the end of June. And therefore, we would want to have a continuation of activity in an entity that's going to carry the torch and carry the ball. And that would be a successor Citizens Commission. And that would be legislation that would have to be drafted, filed, and then enacted. The next activity, and it's positioned here as a midterm activity in the summer, would be to transition the work from this Citizens Commission to the successor Citizens Commission. The activity that follows after that is suggested to have a meeting with the Massachusetts congressional delegation, seeking their feedback on the report and their support for the amendments. In other words, a similar agenda with members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation as had been previously proposed with the 5 Massachusetts appointing authorities. Another midterm activity that you see here is to request and conduct a meeting with the national committees of both the Republicans and the Democrats. Again, seeking their feedback on the report and support for the amendments. And then another midterm activity under this dimension of engaging political leadership is to send a letter to candidates for the President of the United States, again, seeking their feedback on the report and support for the amendments. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 specific activities of a near-term or midterm nature, all intended to activate the dimension of engaging political leadership. Going to move on. Second dimension is engaging other states. I happen to believe that this is critically important. So a near-term activity here is proposed to send a letter and a copy of the report to the 50 governors, secretaries of state, attorney generals, House speakers, and Senate presidents, and send them a copy of the report, and of course, asking their feedback and their support for the amendments. A second activity in the near term is to create a list of similarly situated entities in other states, similar to what we're trying to accomplish at the Citizens Commission, and try to set up some type of communication method, some process of communication and coordination, whereby the successor of Citizens Commission in Massachusetts can have ongoing dialogue and discussion with similar entities across the other 50 states. I would contemplate this taking the form of a cadence of routine conference calls and things of that nature. So that's proposed as a midterm activity. Going to the third dimension, engaging the public writ large. A near-term activity of trying to accomplish a more effective website, something that's a little more interactive and engaging than the current website, and transfer all the content, and of course put future content in a turbocharged website. A second near-term activity is proposed to increase the presence on social media platforms, for example, Facebook, and you see the other examples there as well. A third activity under this dimension of engaging the public is to identify and conduct outreach to broaden the scope of networks and interest groups in Massachusetts, as well as in other states. This might take the form of reaching out to interest groups like the League of Women Voters, Rotary Clubs, veterans groups, the list goes on and on and on. That could be another component of the strategy, is to reach out to other interest groups. Another activity you see listed below this is to conduct outreach to the media in Massachusetts, specifically the Globe and National Public Radio, escalate attention and support for the amendments. We get some degree of media coverage when we released the December 31st report in the middle of January. The notion here is to go back and get escalated media coverage and get the message out. Next on the slide, as you see, a suggested activity of midterm nature is to try to reach out to nationally recognized individuals. You might think along the lines of celebrities, and a specific example was Oprah Winfrey, and try to get people with name recognition, celebrity type status, to escalate support and attention for the amendments, and that would be specific outreach to, individuals of that nature. Next, as you see, a more longer-term activity, which is to call for the citizens of Massachusetts and across all the states to engage in a national day of reflection in matters relating to the amendments. And I'm going to ask Scott to comment upon that in a little bit. And all that could then lead into this notion of a citizens Congress, where theoretically the other states with whom we've been talking, as well as the public writ large, could have some type of convening activity, either virtual or physical. Again, all to the notion of building this groundswell of support for the advancing the amendments. Also in the working group, in addition to myself, was Jeff, Carmen, and Scott. So I'm going to call upon you gentlemen to offer additional commentary about our report. Scott, why don't I start with you first? Are you back? Okay, Carmen, you want to elaborate upon what I said?
Bill, I think this establishes a good framework for us to go forward with the work and to see it to its conclusion. There's a lot of moving parts, and I'm sure we'll be successful with some and less successful with others. But I really think it's a really good framework. So I'm excited.
Jeff, you had a fine hand in this, crafting this strategy as well. Would you like to elaborate?
Sure, and thanks, Bill, for presenting it. I think it really includes a lot of the ideas. I just emphasize there may well be other ideas that this was not intended to foreclose other ways of advancing the amendment, and by definition, constitutional amendments will involve massively complex engagement of Americans all over the country and different states. So this is simply what we can begin doing to move it forward. And I think they're good ideas in that way. And particularly the outreach to other states and trying to get other states as engaged as this one is would be very valuable. So I'll leave it there, but thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Okay, so we would entertain a motion to accept the report of the working group.
I'll make that motion. This is Dominic.
Thank you, Dominic. Do we have a second?
Bill, I would just flag one thing, and I think it's a question that folks asked. I know we've talked about this, but I think it's worth addressing just to be really precise about it. I think we've set a June 30 end or kind of ideal end of the first version of this commission, and you've proposed a number of things that go out significantly longer than that date, which I think are important. And I know that we recommended in our first report that a commission be established or some version of a group of people be appointed to continue the work, which we are recommending be done through this vehicle that you have just, or through these actions that you have just proposed. Be useful to address for the group how for the public how the working group had thought about who is doing these things, what are the options for who does these things, and how are we thinking about the recommendation being made for who does these things.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. That just as a point of order, I just need to have a second, and then we get into discussion about what people heard, and of course we can amend and change and add and delete and so forth. Okay, thanks, Carmen. So I'll start off there, but what's contemplated is that there be a second citizens commission, and we would file legislation that would modify and amend Chapter 388 of the Acts of 2018, which was the statute that created this commission, to establish a successor commission, give them roles, responsibilities, give them funding and administrative support, the things that we lacked in this particular version of the commission, and that the successor commission would be able to transition. They could pick up our work, our final report, and they could carry forward with the balance of near-term and mid-term and longer-term activities, as well as, of course, adjustments and changes that are likely to arise as they engage with other states, as they engage with the political leadership, as they engage with the public. It's expected that things would evolve and improve over the course of time. So all of that would be handed to the successor commission if indeed we can get the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to act on that particular recommendation.
So Bill, this is Costas. As I understand it, then these are recommendations for steps to be taken next. They are not necessarily things that we ourselves, as currently constituted, plan to implement or otherwise do. I mean, maybe some of these things, some meetings with constitutional officers, et cetera, but really this is work that is, it is a suite of next steps that's recommended to some other entity, whatever that may turn out to be, and whether or not some of us may turn out to be on it or not. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Well, that makes sense to me because I'm not sure that either extending our tenure or even that we are equipped as currently constituted to take on some of these tasks, either from a time horizon or a resources horizon, et cetera. And, we all wear different hats and will be involved in this process one way or another, and those roles might be or potentially more significant in advancing this than any efforts undertaken on the part of any new entity that's created, right? So, but I do think it's a nice list of recommendations for what could be done to move this forward. So I would support this as a set of recommendations.
Thank you, Costas, and I'm going to use the privilege of the chair to say myself, if indeed the commission, gives us the vote to move forward with the suggested strategy, as a particular item, I would ask for a working group to which I would volunteer myself that would draft the legislation for the successor Citizens Commission. And that would be something that we want the commission to take a look at in our next meeting, is the draft legislation created by the working group to whom we can hand off as the successor commission.
That said, sometimes those things happen at a much slower pace, right? So there's no guarantee when or if this would be acted upon by the legislature or the governor or resources made available, especially in the current climate of limited resources and shrinking resources. So I think there are already mechanisms in place to advance some of this work, even given what we've produced, right? There is language for an amendment. We have members of Congress who can draft language of, this sort and propose it as legislation in Congress, and also at the state level. There's, all sorts of steps that I think the regular process should be able to undertake once our final report is submitted, apart from any successor commission, et cetera, that would only help those efforts. But we may not get there for some time. There may never be a second commission, and if there is, that might take a while. And I would not want to lose any valuable time pushing these things forward through the normal process, waiting around for a second commission to be created and funded, staffed and constituted, et cetera.
Point well taken. Yep. Other commissioners, continued discussion? I'd start for this stuff and comment. I'd ask you to weigh in here. It would seem to me that the legislature will be enacting various forms of legislation between now and June 30th. For example, supplemental budgets in the General Appropriations Act for the next fiscal year. And so the vehicle might exist for us to propose this legislation in that time frame.
Yeah, we'll be in session the entire month of July, and I expect that we'll continue, and I think there's a high likelihood we'll be in formal session in the month of August. Then, we don't know about September, but I think it's almost a certainty. It is really a certainty that we'll be in session, formal session in July. We'll have a 1/12 budget that will in June. We'll probably do a 1/12 budget to keep us keep the state running in July, and I don't know about August, but we'll be remaining informal. Normally the second year of a session, everything stops after July, everything stops. But because of the coronavirus, we've lost at least 2 months of time that we would normally spend dealing with other things, and we still have to deal with the challenges that are before us because of the pandemic. So yeah, we'll have time. We'll have time to consider this, and so yeah, we should definitely push forward with that. I think we need to put together, as you say, draft legislation, and I'm happy to work with you on that. And perhaps we can also have House Counsel, once we fashion something together, have House Counsel take a look at it to fix it up. And then we need to push
get it
through.
filed. Yeah, get it filed in this time frame while the legislature's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can get it. We can get it. We can get it filed. Costas, whether we get it enacted or not is a different question.
Right.
But at least the opportunity, the door is open to at least file the legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other comments or discussion?
Well, there's some debate in the chat about whether it makes sense to think about a second commission in light of the fact that there was not really any sunsetting language in the law that created us, but it's something we decided to do to ourselves, right? I think that's worth acknowledging and recognizing, but also reconciling with the fact that as I understand it, we were intended to be an advisory commission and not necessarily to implement anything in particular on our own, especially in light of the fact that we don't have any resources to move forward with those types of things. So it's worth thinking about mentioning it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And,
and by the same
as we transition from like the initial study and a set of, a going in set of propositions to transitioning to a more proactive, advancing the amendment mode, it just strikes me that additional support is necessary. Doing this, totally on our own we need more support. And we've talked about that before. Further discussion on this, and then after the commissioners, let's go to open up to the public and then eventually ask for a vote.
I just have one last thing to say about this, and that is that, in putting together legislation for a successor commission, I think that we might want to include in the language of that legislation the ability of the successor commission to really engage in a public-private partnership. What I'm thinking of is the Commonwealth of Mass has a history of never funding commissions. And if we want to be able to have funding and make expenditures, we really may need to have a public-private partnership, and the private partner can help us with funding. Because I'm not optimistic about state funding.
Comment, if we go forward, if the vote is affirmative and we do a working group, did you indicate that you'd be willing to be on the working group?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
I want to have a group of us, between the time of this call and our next call to really, put something on paper in terms of what would this legislation look like. Further discussion by the commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I'm just expressing some of my concerns, like Costas has about like the, in not only the enthusiasm but the energy of moving forward and the momentum, and I'm afraid that that could be lost if it's we kind of just give the ball to another successor commission, and we don't know when that successor commission would even be stood up. So I don't know if there's anything that we can do. I mean, within our limited power and our influence between now and then. I mean, we're scheduled to sunset ourselves at some point soon. So that's the only real concern that I have. I don't know how everybody else feels about some, if there's some middle ground there to keep that ball rolling until successor commission comes on board.
I would agree, Noble. I mean, I'd be willing to continue working with others and keep the commission alive. I mean, we set June, but when we set June, that was before the coronavirus, and life has changed quite a bit because of the coronavirus. So, maybe we can revisit that, and as a group, if we decide to go on beyond June, that's what we do.
That's what we do, yeah.
That's what we do.
Other members of the commission want to comment before we open it up to the public?
I'd be
Okay, let's
interested in
move to
public. I'd be interested in public comment.
Yeah. So,
I've
Greg, do we have
expressed my
any?
opinion on that topic before, yeah.
Greg, do we have anybody from the public that wants to weigh in on the motion that is on the table?
Currently 4 people. We have the account, Caitlin Sullivan.
Okay, we recognize Caitlin.
Again, it's Sam Fieldman, my wife's computer. I had a few things to say. First, the commission, when the commission was first being proposed and created, that proposal was used very strongly and very successfully to kill the We the People Act that this commission has now supported. It was argued quite successfully that this commission is going to study it, and therefore we shouldn't do it now. If you're talking about proposing a second commission, the way that's going to be read, whether it's disingenuous, intentional, or simply accidental in a natural reading, it's going to be read as a statement from the commission that you did the best you could with your resources, but you really didn't have enough to study the issue and you can't really stand by your recommendations. I think that's
Okay,
unfair
Sam,
to the great work
I
you've
don't
done.
understand. Can you explain that? I don't understand what you just said.
Sure. There was a letter sent to all the state senators last year when the We the People Act was up for a vote. Among other things, but the one that seemed to carry the strongest weight was that this commission was, or not last year, 2 years ago, that this commission was being considered for the ballot, and that before this commission meets and makes its recommendations, they shouldn't be proposing the We the People Act. This commission has now met and endorsed the We the People Act explicitly, and if this commission comes back and says we need another commission, it's going to undercut that endorsement as well as the other work that you've done.
Okay, that's where I lose you, because if we've endorsed the House Bill 3208 and then we hand it off to a successor commission, I fail to see how that undercuts the effect of our endorsement.
Well, what you have to keep in mind is that the people who are going to claim that it undercuts your endorsement are not necessarily going to be honest actors in that. There were other things that they said.
I'm trying to be argumentative. I'm just not understanding your point.
Sure. Well, the claim that they will make is that this commission was underfunded and, quite frankly, not funded. Had trouble meeting numerous times, and had some difficulty, which is why they are proposing a new commission. They didn't write much about this Article 5 proposal. They endorsed it, but they wrote very little about it. And therefore, a second commission that's going to be studying this in more depth should be heard before we take any steps.
Okay.
That's the argument they're going to make.
I really disagree with what you just said.
Yeah, I would too, Carmen. Yeah. The commissioners have, go ahead, Carmen. You have questions for Sam?
No, I disagree, Sam, absolutely. The reality is that in the House and in the Senate, the biggest problem in pushing the We the People through has been the thought of people in leadership that having a limited convention is impossible, and that it would just run away. And Armageddon would occur. And I think that one thing that this commission has done is we've brought in a lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of legal minds, and we've looked at the issue, and we've voted that indeed we can and should push for a limited amendments convention, and that gives us, and that's what we're doing now. We're pushing at leadership. We're pushing at the House and Senate leadership to sway them by continuing to.
Okay,
we're not weakening it.
I agree.
I don't want to get into a debate about this because I mean, the
Okay,
recommendation-
without getting into debate, may I make a suggestion though? Because I agree 100% with what Carmine said, but I think that it will still be argued. But the suggestion that I have, which I think is a good suggestion regardless of how you feel about my warning, you've already got groups that you don't actually need any legal mandate in order to do what you're doing. What you need is a mandate from the people. That mandate can be conferred simply by the endorsement of this group, which already has the mandate from the people. What the 1974 commission from the American Bar Association, which was similar, what they ended up doing was appointing one person who was a spokesperson for the commission going forward, who continued to carry the message, explain what the commission had done and what the commission had done, and reach out to other groups, testify before Congress, things of that nature. And he continued to do that. That's John Feerick was the person. He did that for years after the commission disbanded. You can also confer that mandate onto the other groups, both in the state, like We the People Massachusetts, and nationally, like American Promise for the Congressional Path and Wolfpack for the Convention Path, that have been working with you and that who you've come to know pretty well. You can confer that mandate by endorsing those groups as well.
Okay, very good, sir. Thank you. Commissioners, have any other questions for Sam?
Well, I just want to interject, just to echo some of the things Carmine said, which is that, once we issue our final report that includes all of the deliverables that the law established for us, I think the work of this commission is done. And I think that it was never part of the scope of this commission to implement a constitutional amendment. It was to study the issue and to make recommendations that can then be taken forward by legislatures, Congress, or other entities to push this forward. And we might, as individuals, or perhaps even as some new entity, help move that along, but it will not be within the scope of this commission as constituted by the ballot initiative in 2018 to do that work. We neither have the resources, perhaps not even the expertise to do that. So, I think that we're not trying to say that we will do that, but I also wouldn't want to, diminish the work we've done as a commission. And I think we've done successfully by delivering on the things the law required us to deliver on, by taking on more responsibility to implement those things, which we may or may not be able to do as effectively or at all. So I think we just need to be cautious to be clear that at some point when we issue our final report that covers all of the outstanding areas we didn't cover in the January report, that the work of this commission will be concluded and it will be successfully concluded.
Thank you, Costas. Other commissioners have questions for Sam? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Greg, who's next?
The next one is John Lamb.
We recognize John.
Thank you. I have a particular point which concerns what's different about this strategy compared to those of other organizations. I feel like this is the strategy that's coming from the people. It's the people's movement. And it needs to focus on expanding that rather than the more esoteric ways of working with leaders and candidates and things like that. And I don't think that comes out very clearly in the overall strategy, but one of the key things that we'll need, I think, is a different way to spin the message. We've all been focused on the process because we're concerned about the process, but actually most people aren't concerned about process, they're concerned about outcomes. And I think one of the extra lines of activity that's defined here should be to develop the sort of value proposition, the what's in it for citizens kind of thing. And there's a lot of things to pick from there. Things like you may all have a minimum wage over $20, all have healthcare at half the price that covers everybody very well, and many other things. There wouldn't have been 700,000 dead from the opioid crisis, and the Boeing 737 Max wouldn't have got its airworthiness.
Okay, we get it, John. Yeah, okay.
Something
I'm
like
trying to cut you off. It's just that we're over time here.
I just think that needs to be a deliverable there in the list of things that need to be created, so we can turn the message to something that can go out to ordinary people, kind of thing, the people who haven't been paying so much attention.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners for John? Okay, actually, I would agree that the value proposition needs to be part of the charter of the successor commission in a specific activity within the strategy. Who's next, Greg?
David Rosenberg is next.
David, we recognize David.
Thank you. So I support a number of the things that I heard, but not everything I heard. So let me try to piece together the parts that I'd like to endorse. One is that rather than lose the momentum, that this commission not disband as of June 30th unless there is a successor commission already in place. That is, that this commission should continue until it has a successor to whom it could hand stuff off. Another is because this commission does lack resources, I suggest that you should take advantage of the resources that are being offered by groups such as American Promise, We the People Massachusetts, and Wolfpack, and that you consider, Carmen was talking about a public-private partnership. So I guess I'm endorsing that in an informal way of just taking advantage of the work that groups such as the American Promise, We the People, and Wolfpack are willing to do without legislation for it, or without very much of a formal agreement, but just use the people who have been involved with this for quite a while and are working for it and share the same goals that you have in order to move things forward until there can be some successor to take it up more formally. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And, we couldn't have done it without Sam and others. You guys have been awesome. Commissioners have any questions for David? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Who's next, Greg?
Next is Barry Rosenberg.
Hello, thank you. I had two concerns. One, a new commission gives an opportunity for the ball to be dropped. I don't know what kind of guidelines you have set up for the establishment of a new commission, and for you to bow out before things are in place to ensure that it will be something workable and continue what you've established and things don't change. I would not like to see you abandon ship. My second point is, if you're looking at a private-public partnership, private partnership always raises a red flag for me that special interests enter the picture, and the way your work is carried on is going to be clouded and corrupted. Not necessarily, but they're certainly inviting the potential.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners for Barry? Okay, Greg, how many more do we have?
Last one is Ulysses Leitner.
Okay, we recognize Ulysses.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to follow up on what I think that two speakers ago said, which is the importance of, harnessing the energy of, public groups that are, interested in this stuff. And to that end, I think that the commission's current plan of proposing your focus on, one strategy for 2 amendments, I think that's a major potential strategic wound you're inflicting on yourself. Because I get that the commission is very opposed to the idea of a single amendment. Like, I gather this, I understand that that's your position, despite what, a lot of the public wants of a single amendment. But I don't see any reason why you can't recommend both a possible route forward that is one amendment that achieves both goals, and as another strategic route, a possible route forward that is two separate amendments, such as what the commission has actually been discussing. And if you keep both of those strategic options on the table in your report, and that is totally consistent with your guiding principles, which specifically say that you need to leverage multiple paths to increase your chances of movement towards the ultimate objective. If you do that, you'll be able to actually keep on board a lot of groups that are very focused on a single amendment. But the second you make clear that you are not going to recommend that and that you're only interested in two separate amendments, you're going to bleed out a lot of the grassroots support of the very people who are most active in this and who would be natural allies for you. But honestly, you're alienating them. A lot of the people on in the public on this call who really want to see one amendment are probably not going to be as interested in helping move this work forward if they see that the commission is going off in a very focused direction that is totally hostile to what the public, a lot of the public wants. So I would strongly encourage you to consider both possibilities as strategic routes, not just the two amendments.
Thank you, Ulysses. The commissioners have any questions for Ulysses?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Jeff, you're on.
Yeah, thanks. It's certainly a fair point. I don't think any. I interpret one strategy for two amendments to mean just to be much closer, actually, to Ulysses' comment than far away from it. In other words, the idea is move these both forward. If Congress wants to stick them together, if the citizens want to stick them together and pass it as one, I think this commission would be delighted. I think that the strategic judgment which we brought to this is that these aren't two different problems, and that putting them together actually isn't what everybody wants, or a significant majority even wants, because they don't know how the interplay happens. And so giving them both life to move forward and to come together, if that's where the energy that we need to help drive this forward causes it to do, is excellent, because it doesn't foreclose that.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. I want to move to a vote here before we run out of time. Commissioners have any other questions for Ulysses?
There are two more people who've raised their hand since then, if you want to open time.
Well,
We're out of time.
we're running really short, and we still have a quorum, and I know that other people have a hard stop coming up. We have a motion that's been seconded and discussed, which is to accept the recommendations of the working group on a suggested strategy for advancing the amendment, which also has the caveat that there would be a working group when I'd ask for volunteers to work on draft legislation for this hypothetical successor commission. All right, 2 minutes. Okay, 1 minute each. Who's next up?
The next one is Clark.
Clark, please. We recognize Clark for the 60 seconds.
Sure. I just wanted to second Ulysses' motion that the commission have two pathways, a united amendment and two separate ones. And also, ideally, if the commission could come up with some manner of, before sunsetting, handing the ball off to the second commission so that the work that the commission is doing isn't interrupted. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
The last one is Barry Rosenberg again.
Barry, we've already commented. Please, 60 seconds or less.
Okay. The suggestion that there should be an amendment which contains both legs is something that I emailed in, and I agree with the other people that spoke. And I would like to point out that if you do not have the constitutional amendments for human beings only, you are going to have trouble enforcing the first one.
Thank you. The commission is ready to vote. I'm going to call the roll. So the motion has been made and seconded to accept the recommendations of the working group on a suggested strategy for advancing the amendment, with the understanding that we're also going to have a working group to work on some more specific details about drafting legislation that we will look at our next meeting.
Bill,
I'll start off.
Bill, there's only 6 commissioners on the screen.
Yeah, but I thought I still saw Cheryl listed here. She may not be on the screen.
She's not on the list of attendees either.
All right, so we lost the quorum, so we'll table this thing. We can't take a vote because we'll take a non-binding sense of the group. Would people be willing to work with me on drafting legislation that we could look at in our next meeting? Carmen, you said yes?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Anybody else?
I'll take a look at it, Bill. I'm not sure I'll be able to get into drafting, but if it's helpful to run it by me.
Okay. Anybody else? So we'll have,
I can help y'all.
thanks, Isabel. Thank you. Okay, time and place for next meeting. I would suggest that we need at least one, probably two more meetings if we want to get to the finish line by June 30th with a second report, a final report that includes preferred language for amendments and recommendations for advancing the amendment. In other words, if you think of the report of December 31st, we had 5 specific tasks assigned to the commission. We answered 3 of the 5 in the December 31st report. In this final report, I would suggest it's our responsibility to answer the 4th and the 5th. That's completing the task. So I think that's going to take a couple more meetings. But let me just ask, would people be willing to do another meeting? And if so, could somebody want to throw out a date and a time, maybe a couple weeks from now, something towards earlier part of June?
Bill, I'm not opposed to multiple meetings and I'm happy to participate, although I think that much of the heavy lifting for the outstanding work has already been done. We have amendment language that has been adopted and voted upon. We have recommendations that we can hopefully pass. We were on the verge of doing that today, but we can probably do that pretty quickly after our next meeting. So, you know, I don't think that this report will be as lengthy and as difficult to put together as the first one was.
Agreed. Yep.
But
how about if we meet 2 weeks from today, that's June 9th.
Right. That's fine.
Fine.
June 9th work for people?
Yep.
I'm good with that.
Sure.
Yes.
And say 6:30 to 8:30?
Okay.
Greg, can you set it up? As our
Yes, I
host?
can.
Okay. Another example of public-private partnership. And, you know, Costas, to your point, I could imagine that we've made all the content decisions on this next call of June 9th. So maybe we'll do a draft of the second and final report and just have one final meeting just to review the final draft before, you know, we submit it. Something like 2 more meetings and then maybe we're done. Okay, is there any other discussion on this topic? We are agreed it's going to be June 9th, 6:30 to 8:30. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any opposed? Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.